Near the beginning of Lester Del Rey's 1957 novella, Badge of Infamy, Del Rey made an eerily accurate prediction of a coming plague from China in the early 21st century and implied a lab leak cover-up. This is one of several astonishing observations he made in this remarkable work of science fiction that delves into the collapse of the U.S. as a functioning republic, the enormous growth of socialized healthcare, control by the government by what he refers to as the medical lobby and the space lobby, and the New World Order with the United States on top as its protectorate. Del Rey also offers a more realistic view of space travel and accomplishments by the year 2100, a mere 78 years from now. Before we go further, please take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you. Born June 2, 1915, Lester Del Rey was an American science fiction author and editor known for many novels including Tunnel Through Time, Nerves, Outpost of Jupiter, Mysterious Planet, Somewhere Human, and of course, Badge of Infamy. His books were mainly published during the 1950s and 60s, during an amazing period of science fiction that included stellar contributors to the genre like Isaac Asimov, Fredrick Pohl, Fritz Leiber, Clifford Simak, and others. Del Rey was most successful editing with his fourth wife, Judy Lynn Del Rey, at Ballantine Books, where they established the fantasy and science fiction imprint Del Rey Books in 1977. After science fiction gained respectability and began to be taught in classrooms, Del Rey stated that academics interested in the genre should, quote, "get out of my ghetto." To develop, science fiction had to remove itself from the usual critics who viewed it from the perspective of the mainstream and who judged its worth largely on its mainstream values. As part of that mainstream, it would never have had the freedom to make the choices it did, many of them quite possibly wrong, but necessary for its development, unquote. Lester Del Rey died May 10, 1993, at the age of 77. Badge of Infamy. Summary by Thomas Rose. Set in the year 2100, the story revolves around one central character, Dr. Daniel Feldman, stripped of rank and status and named Pariah for violating medical lobby rules when he attempted to save another man's life outside of the socialized hospital system. Feldman stows away on a spaceship and flees to Mars Colony. There, while practicing medicine without a license, he stumbles upon a plague organism indigenous to Mars that threatens the whole colony and potentially the human race. Performing research to identify a cure which is also in gross violation of the medical lobby rules, he must risk his life to buck the entrenched bureaucracy, bent on sweeping the whole matter under the rug in the name of political expediency. In Chapter 2, Del Rey provides a painful history of the 21st century, wherein the Republic withers because of men who did not know and did not care how to sustain a true functioning democracy. Here are a few key passages.
Idealism. Throughout history, some men had sought the ideal, and most had called it freedom. The men who drew the Constitution had been pretty practical dreamers. They came to their task after a bitter war and a worse period of wild chaos, and they had learned where idealism stopped and idiocy began. They set up a republic with all the elements of democracy that they considered safe. It had worked well enough to make America the #1 power of the world, but the men who followed the framers of the new plan were a different sort, without the knowledge of practical limits. The privileges their ancestors had earned in blood and care became automatic rights. Practical men tried to explain that there were no such rights, that each generation had to pay for its rights with responsibility. That kind of talk didn't get far. People wanted to hear about rights, not about duties. They took the phrase that all men were created equal and left out the implied kicker that equality was in the sight of God and before the law. They wanted an equality with the greatest men without giving up their drive toward mediocrity, and they meant to have it. Organized special interests stepped in where the mob had failed. Lobbies grew up. There had always been pressure groups, but now they developed into a third arm of the government, and eventually the government paid most medical costs, with doctors working on a fixed fee. Then, quantity of treatment paid rather than quality. Competence no longer mattered so much. It took a worldwide plague to turn the tide. By the time the world recovered, America ran it, and the medical lobby was untouchable. Ryan made a deal with Space Lobby, and the two effectively ran the world. None of the smaller lobbies could buck them, and neither could the government.
Del Rey makes a series of remarkable predictions which have either come to pass or are dangerously close to being reality. Lesser men have taken control of the U.S. government and run it into the ground with corruption, ignorance, and mediocrity. Not only are people judged by their immutable characteristics, discriminatory edicts have been waged to drive progress backwards by at least 60 years. As the push for mandated socialized medicine resurfaces, and Big Pharma takes the wheel riding high on the exploitation of COVID-19, we've seen the healthcare system fall into a state of near-complete ineptitude and greed. In Badge of Infamy, Big Pharma becomes the medical lobby that begins as a benign entity created to help the populace, but is inevitably corrupted by backroom deals between lobbyists and politicians. The medical lobby and space lobby control the U.S. government, which exists only in name. For the next 80 years, the space lobby looks to Mars for colonization, and by the year 2100, they've somehow managed to build a city and some villages on the Red Planet. Will we have a colony on Mars by the year 2100? Will there even be a desire to have a colony? It is difficult to say, but Del Rey's prediction of limited colonization is much more reasonable than many of his peers who thought that the 21st and 22nd centuries would see humans embarking on interstellar space flights. A sweet thought, but highly unlikely. Even science fiction legend Arthur C. Clarke imagined a colony on the moon by 2001, buoyed by the moon landing in the late 60s. It is still possible that the world's private space ventures will get us farther and faster into space exploration. Time will tell. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Room 101. Stay tuned for the next episode, and please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.